Alright, let's go into a few more new releases, and this is that point in time when we're getting into, the end of this year, going into next year, we're going into award season, so we're going to have a lot of prestige stuff and a lot of very long movies also, because the next video obviously is going to be Avatar. But I think I want to start with Babylon, which is Damien Chazelle's new movie, who like most people, it felt like pretty much the entire world. When Whiplash came out, I pretty much worshipped the ground that he walked on, and I still love that movie so much. That's never gonna change. But I have found, as time goes on, I've been kind of turning my nose up at La La Land more and more as it goes on, and then I kind of keep forgetting First Man happened. That's probably just because it's due for a rewatch. But as far as how I feel about him in general, I've confessed before, if this is one of those cases where you were to say, oh, you don't like somebody famous because you're jealous, yeah, it's probably got something to do with that. It's something really petty like that. Where not only is he doing the thing that I want to do, but he keeps making movies about how great doing that thing is. But with that said, this does almost seem like he was kind of intentionally going for like an anti La La Land, where it's like, here's La La Land and here's everything looking super glamorous. Yeah, Emma Stone kind of went through the ringer a little bit, but for the most part, everything turned out great, apart from the romance. But they got to live their lives doing what they wanted to do, and it was all glamorous and bittersweet. And Babylon, I guess, is supposed to be like a really, like what the really ugly side looks like, where he's kind of taken the approach that Michel Zanavicius did when he did The Artist, about the transition from silent movies to sound, and obviously, Singing in the Rain plays a big part in this. But seeing that story in a much darker way than we have before, in a much more confronting way than we have before. But that's honestly just one part of it, because this is a whole array of different characters and stories sort of going on, all of which kind of have this ugly sort of, front to them. And the idea of all of this being on the surface when underneath is like, the orgy parties and the drugs and the very in the gutter sort of like death, like literal death, not whether it be, the death of your spirit or just literally death. It goes about as deep as it can, and sometimes quite literally, through the layers of hell, essentially, that you might find here when you're pursuing this really grand lifestyle that you see on the surface. Um, I will say right away that I felt a little bad for Margot Robbie and Chazelle in a way also, because I went into this movie and the first thing you see is an intro from Margot Robbie and Diego Calva, and she's talking about how great it is that you came out to a theater to see this, and she specifically says, seeing it the way you were meant to see it, with an energized crowd. And I was the only person in there. But it is worth noting that we pretty much had a snowstorm blow through the morning of, and like the roads were all icy, and the wind was horrible, and it was like -degrees. So that's probably why I was the only person in the theater. I probably would have not gone if it weren't for the fact that I already had the ticket. When I went to see Avatar, I went ahead and got it. So, and I paid with cash, so I couldn't, So I had to go. So that's what happened. And yeah, I do have to say, I'm sure an energized crowd probably helps, but there's also something about seeing this movie in a very vast, dark room on a giant screen, just with yourself. It's like a whole other experience, but I don't know that it takes away too much. Like, I don't know that I would have gotten anything out of this. And I've talked before how it actually does play a part if you're really into a movie and you also have a crowd that's really into it. But I don't know if this movie would have done that for me, because the way, I don't want it to sound like it basically ended up being what I thought it would be. But like I don't want it to sound like I wasn't giving it a chance or anything. But I kind of was wary going in about the idea it was supposed to be 3 hours of excess and depravity and drugs and orgies and all that stuff, because we've kind of seen that. And it's like, when you see like what Scorsese did with The Wolf of Wall Street, I don't really know how much more you can play it up than what that movie did, unless you're like actually infusing porn into it like Caligula did. But apart from that, I would say The Wolf of Wall Street, as far as what a mainstream studio can get away with now, I think The Wolf of Wall Street's kind of conquered this territory already. So this kind of feels like I saw Margot Robbie doing an interview, and she was being asked about, oh, all the nudity, all the orgy scenes, that must have been crazy, that must have been insane. And she literally just said, well, being on the set of The Wolf of Wall Street basically desensitized me, so it didn't faze me. So it's like, I feel like that speaks to the power of what The Wolf of Wall Street did, and like I said, and the fact that you can almost see the wheels turning, the more the movie tries to be insane, the more you can feel Chazelle, like, pushing in that direction, and, like, almost like he's specifically telling you, the audience, hey, look how crazy this is, instead of just letting you sort of fall into it and experience it. It's like we're being forced to say, oh my god, this is insane, this is crazy. And it's to the point also to where there were openings, like in the opening scene, where even though I didn't see this with an energized crowd, I could imagine where the energized crowd was supposed to be. Because the very opening scene is this scene with the elephant, and it's supposed to be. It looks like Manny, our lead character, I guess, has just this random job he's supposed to do for this Hollywood party, and then the reveal is that he's transporting an elephant, like a full-sized elephant. And the guy's response to this that sees this is that a fucking elephant? And there's like emphasis on it, and there's kind of a pause for laughter. And it's like, and everybody keeps saying like, oh, that's an elephant. They keep acknowledging the elephant every time they see it. Like, the movie is desperately trying to tell us how crazy it is and how over the top it is. And that gets really tiresome really fast. But I think the great thing about this, that helps the movie a lot, is that this is real. It's being marketed as this whole crazy thing for 3 straight hours, but once we get past this opening party, I feel like it wasn't that much outside of the character of Nellie herself. Is pretty much trying to pick that up from where it goes. And I'm trying to get all this out of the way because I do have a lot of good things to say about the movie. I just want to get past this whole thing that I wasn't really into. So, on this whole idea of it's basically supposed to be this really sort of, look how, we're really going to the extreme and we're really going over the top and everything's so dirty and debaucherous and stuff like that, and it just pummels you with that, praying to God you'll walk out of the theater saying that. And that'll be its word-of-mouth marketing, which they've already tried to accomplish themselves before it's even come out and anybody's even really seen it. The marketing is trying to tell you, oh my god, it's so insane, it's so crazy, you've never seen anything like this. Or whatever, unless you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street or Caligula or something. But apart from that, and there's even, I guess you could say Eyes Wide Shut vibes as well, where you've got, like, the orgy parties and stuff like that. And there's even a whole sequence at the beginning of the movie where there is a dead girl upstairs they have to take care of without anybody knowing, which is also one of the, opening scenes of Eyes Wide Shut. So there's that. And yeah, this one is, I think what Babylon is trying to do is sort of go on this fine line of what Hollywood would have really been like in the 20s, and also being, like, a living sort of myth. Like, somewhere in between. Like, there's truth in it, but there's also a lot of Hollywood mythology in it, and it's kind of trying to blend them. And I can get that and appreciate it. But it's like, when you can see what it's trying to do from so far away, it's, like, already tiresome before it even really tries to begin. So, the other thing I just want to get out of the way real quick before we can talk about the good stuff is Margot Robbie's performance in general, and this character, and the way that she's written and portrayed. Where I've talked before about how Robbie can go kind of very actory and very over the top, when you just look at her Harley Quinn or her Tonya Harding or something, and you can just see all the wheels turning. You can see an actress making very specific decisions and hoping to convey those as blatantly as possible with, like, no subtlety whatsoever. And it's, like I said, and usually I just see an actress making very over the top choices rather than a character with her. But those are only just a few cases. She's also very capable of feeling like really real and just having a certain presence about her that's not too over the top and really leaves an impact because of how just not blatant or over the top that it is, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or like Bombshell. Her 2019 was really good because she's amazing in Bombshell. I feel like even though she got nominated for it, I feel like people kind of forget that performance when talking about her. But yeah, she can be an amazing. The Wolf of Wall Street, she's amazing. She kind of gets overshadowed by like DiCaprio and Jonah Hill and McConaughey and all them, but she's there and present just as much, especially in the dramatic scenes with DiCaprio and that long take fight scene. She's definitely an amazing actress, and I don't want it to sound like I'm saying otherwise. But here, basically, my problem with the whole first part of the movie, Nellie's character is basically that in person form, where it's like, oh, look how big she's going, look how vulgar she is, look how insane but lovable she is. We're supposed to fall in love with her the way that Manny does at first sight, and watching her just go through life doing the most insane things possible. Fighting snakes and doing drugs and dancing on tables and all that. And we're supposed to just keep saying over and over and over again, look how big she is. Look how bursting her personality is. She just, comes off the screen, and it's like, we're just it's just basically telling us that over and over and over and over again. With that said, later on, much later on, there are plenty of moments where Nellie does feel like she finally becomes like a real person and a real character, and Robbie does find the right spots for those and the right notes there, and does make her like sympathetic and sees her as this really tragic figure. Even though it does always come back around to, oh, she's bigger than life, bigger than life, bigger than life, over and over and over again. And yeah, so for me, it was much more the smaller moments with Robbie that I feel like come through a lot more. And I feel like that's just basically her filmography in general, where when she doesn't have to go super big and be bigger than life like a comic book character or whatever the fuck I, Tonya was trying to do, that's where she really finds her strengths, I think. And they're definitely there, and they're very, very strong. So, like I said, I don't want to take too much away from her, but it's like I said, when you can see the wheels turning, that's just really just puts me off of what's going on, and that's what a lot of this movie going big felt like. But then we have stuff like what Brad Pitt is doing here to kind of counter that, where we were talking about it being this really dark portrayal of stories we've seen before, like in The Artist and Singing in the Rain. But to see like how this could have actually affected real people working in this business, and it's Pitt's portrayal that has this really tragic vibe to it. He's still got, the Brad Pitt charisma, and he still has plenty of funny moments, but there's almost always an underlying tragedy in Jack's character, and I feel like that's one of the... Brad Pitt in general is one of the big strengths of this movie, and how he never really goes that big. And it's like, when he does go big, it feels like it's warranted. He has a really great scene where he goes off on Catherine Waterston and talks about why movies are so important to him and millions of people. And that's something that really speaks... That's something that I imagine people could say is like, Chazelle being masturbatory about the movie business and stuff like that, but that's the kind of thing that I can appreciate, where it talks about, why people love movies as much as they do. And that really rings true here. And I feel like if the movie had a lot more of that, and it's like, and we're coming, like I said, we're coming through Jack's character with this, who is a tragic figure, so it's not like when you talk about love for the movies within a movie, it doesn't always have to be, like, glamorous about it. Like I said, there's definitely something here that feels real and doesn't just feel like it's building up Hollywood to be, more glamorous than it is. It just feels true. And that's the stuff that I feel like is really coming through here. And it's like, and honestly, the more those true moments hit, the more ridiculous and unnecessary the over-the-top stuff looks in retrospect. So there's that, and the way he's able to go back and forth between an alcoholic who's literally on the verge of puking or passing out, and then when action is called, he can just be on. And because that's the kind of thing you hear about when you read like about history and actors of way in the past, or probably even actors in the present, where they could go through their vices and be like just on the verge of nothingness. But once a camera is rolling and they hear action, then we can see what we end up seeing on the screen. Like they just have that ability, and that's why they are what they are, and why it's such a core of their being, and why the position that Jack is in this movie, in this transition, and kind of being pushed out of the industry, is going to be somebody that just breaks, not just breaks his spirit, but just breaks everything his whole life has been. And there's nothing that feels over dramatized, believe it or not, about the sort of downward spiral that Jack goes down and the way we watch it. Because like I said, the way Pitt plays it, there's just such a truth in it that's really coming through. And like I said, for a movie that's combining truth and myth, like when those truthful moments really hit, I feel like they're just highlighted even more. So he also has a great scene with Gene Smart, where Gene Smart talks about how actors are immortalized on film, regardless of if they end up in irrelevance or whatever, as long as they're on a movie that exists. This is actually something that I think about all the time anyway. When you go back and watch movies from even like the 1910s era, the silent movies in there, and then the 20s here, and so on. Like movies where you watch them and you realize that everybody in the cast is dead at this point. Like even everybody in the background, all the extras are dead at this point. But they'll be immortalized because somebody will come across that, and it's like to actually see Gene Smart's character articulate that within the movie. It's something that really stood out. So, like I said, we've got that combating with the big nature of everything, and there's some cases where I could feel an appreciation for some of the big qualities. Because, like I said, just in general, in theory, the idea of bringing some of the myths of Hollywood to life, is very interesting, and interesting to see from a director like Chazelle, who's willing to go as big as possible. And some of these images that almost look mythical, but yet are pretty much how movies were made, like when we see a massive battle scene take place and a massive army come down over a hill, and as they pass by in the same shot, there's a whole orchestra playing, like within just yards away, if that. And like I said, there's just something so big and beautiful about the scenes like that, and that's the kind of stuff where it's like, yes, when you go as big as possible to portray stuff like that. But sometimes we get sort of lost along the way, there's a shit joke at the beginning of the movie. There's a projectile vomiting joke in the middle of the movie, and this is the kind of thing that almost feels like it clashes with the more real moments and the more truthful moments. And that's when it feels like the movie is kind of messy, and it's kind of like, maybe if it had chosen to be one thing or the other. Like, I can appreciate the blending, but when they go as big as they did, like with shit jokes and puke jokes, that's when you start to wonder, should it have just been one thing or another? There's even one point where Brad Pitt, and I think that was Sean O'Brien in the bathroom scene, are talking about the transition from sound and stuff like that, and there is, believe it or not, a kind of fourth wall breaking shit joke. That was kind of surprising, and like I said, I actually kind of appreciate it for how surprising it was. But still, it does feel like the focus of the movie is all over the place, and not really in the way that you kind of get the sense that it wants to be all over the place to an extent, but it's a little much at times and a little off its target at times. But so looking at it from the perspective of the industry and how we see that, I do like the way they incorporated like actual real movies into it. Like we talked about the Singing in the Rain thing. Obviously, the jazz singer is going to play a really big part in this. And a scene that I really appreciated in Babylon was the scene where the jazz singer is being seen for the first time, and Manny walks into the theater and sees this. And people are going fucking insane being able to hear and see this movie. And like when Jolson speaks, like to actually hear him and sings, they can hear him. And that's the kind of thing where when you watch The Jazz Singer today, the obvious awkward stuff aside, it's a very very unremarkable movie. Like it's literally just a movie that exists. Like any other musical of that 20s and 30s era where they all just blend in together. There's nothing remarkable about it. So to see it in the context of what it represents as far as the shift in movies at that time was something really, really interesting, and it does kind of give you another perspective if you were to go back to The Jazz Singer now, which you probably don't really want to do, not just because of the awkward stuff, but because it's, just really not that great. But yeah, seeing it with this, roaring crowd, seeing something they've never seen before, I like getting that perspective on movies of the past that made those certain breaks into other directions that, like I said, may seem unremarkable now, but it does give you the appreciation for seeing how history sort of developed with movies, which is fun. Um, and also, there's the whole idea of sound causing a lot of hurdles that nobody was prepared for, and exploring that territory. This is another thing where it's like, yes, this is the stuff I love about movies like this, and this is some of the great stuff about this movie in particular. So we have this very long scene. It reminded me a lot of... I've talked a lot about how, while I don't really care for musical biopics, one thing I love about musical biopics are the scenes where we see them build the music and the songs we know from the ground up. And this scene kind of reminded me of those kind of scenes where we see something sort of built from the ground up that we recognize. So we're watching this scene. It's just one very small, insignificant scene of Nellie walking into a room and answering the phone. And they're trying to film this for a movie. And like I said, all these unforeseen hurdles that come with sound now in this era. And this scene goes on and on and on. And it's like this would be a criticism in any other sense, but the fact that this scene goes on and on and on is the point. So the longer it goes on, the more effective the scene ends up getting. Especially with the brilliant addition of, because they can't have any sound pickup whatsoever, they have to turn the air conditioning off. So while they can't get this scene right and the tensions are building already, there's also, the room is getting hotter and people are sweating more and tensions are rising even more. People are literally getting ready to kill each other because this scene can't be filmed. That's the kind of thing that I love about movies like this, is seeing stuff like this. You can see I feel like we haven't seen this for a while. You can see the director of Whiplash in this scene, where you can see the mounting tension and okay, how extreme is this gonna go? Like, what are the people in this room capable of if they're pushed enough by something that may seem insignificant in a bigger picture? So that seeing that kind of tension again from Chazelle was something that I've really kind of missed, which is great. And talking about other side characters we have, Eric Roberts has a nice part here as Nellie's dad. He's an actor that, because he's known for like being in straight to DVD land for God knows how long now, I think people forget that Eric Roberts is an awesome actor. Like, he's really, really good. If you watch his earlier movies, and even some of his shitty movies have moments of brilliant acting in them. I am not kidding. Like, Eric Roberts is kind of this unsung great actor, so I love seeing him get, like, his small part in Inherent Vice and something like this, where you kind of wished you could get more of him, which is great. And like I said, with all the characters that are coming and going, it's like leaving you wanting more is happening a lot here, and that's actually good, because there's still something else that you can take in and love that kind of come through this movie like a revolving door. Spike Jonze is here as a director. He may or may not supposed to be Eric von Stroheim, maybe. That's the vibe I was getting anyway. That's a great cameo. Lucas Haas is here in a part that's bigger than he's been getting lately, which is really great, because it's usually like he just sort of pops up in these little small parts where it's like, oh, because he's part of the DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire crew. It's nice that he's here. Like, he had that small part in The Revenant, he had that small part in Inception. And so with Tobey Maguire being a big part of this movie, it was nice to see Lucas Haas get like an actual, real crucial part, because he is capable of that. I Lucas Haas performance I always really loved was when he showed up at the end of Alpha Dog, where he was only there for like maybe 2 minutes, but it's like this guy really has something. He should definitely have bigger parts than he does. So that was great to see him get like an actual really crucial part and be alongside an actor of Pitt's caliber for like all of his screen time. That was really nice to see also. So now that I've mentioned Tobey Maguire, I guess we can go down that path. Yeah, I don't know how much I really want to say here because it's essentially part of the movie's climax. The movie has like maybe 10 climaxes, but I would say this is certainly one where it's like the start of the third act, where Tobey Maguire comes in as he seems to have stepped out of a David Lynch movie. Like a Lynch movie was playing on screen and he just literally walked out of it and then into Los Angeles in the 20s, or we might have been close to the 30s by then, or the late 20s. And yeah, this is the point where I could imagine another world where I say this is where the movie really goes off the rails, because I was talking before about how you have shit and puke jokes and you have the real stuff, and it's like pick which one you want to be. When Tobey Maguire comes into this movie, I can imagine people saying like, oh, where the hell did this movie go? It's like, how did we're in a completely different place now. This movie is all over the fucking map now. But this is where I started to kind of embrace that. And I could totally, like, anybody that says that, it's a totally valid criticism. I don't think this movie knows what the hell it is by the time we get to the Tobey Maguire stuff. But I was kind of into it. And like I said, I think it's because there was a progression of, how hellacious the whole business is and the whole town is. Where it's like we see the glamorous, front here, but then even amongst the glamorous front, we can see like the debauchery is wild enough to where it's like this is kind of dark and weird and kind of gross. And then the fact that it keeps going and we kind of keep going lower and lower, and it's like seeing the darkness more and more as it goes, it kind of just makes sense eventually that we would end up where the hell Tobey Maguire takes us. Literally, we're following him down a dark path to places that you will not see coming. And like I said, I think when you see the actual progression of the movie and what it's trying to do about going behind this facade of the orgy parties and getting darker and deeper, yeah, I can actually appreciate it. That he just went all in with, let's just literally basically go to the depths of hell. Like, let's just do that. And get a taste of it, and once our characters get a taste of it, see where they end up. So that, honestly, I can get behind. And Maguire's performance, I can get behind. Because it's like... Because he's playing a very scary and threatening character, which might be hard to believe for some people, because he did, like in The Good German, the Soderbergh movie, he played a character that was, like, really aggressive, and people were just like, I don't see it. And then a few years after that was Brothers. I thought he was really good in Brothers, but some people, I think, had trouble buying him as, like, the crazed, sort of soldier type or whatever. But here, it is like they're using the things we know Tobey Maguire for, where it's like, typically he wouldn't be threatening. Like, he doesn't have a threatening laugh, he doesn't have a threatening face, and using that to their advantage, and making his face and his laugh terrifying. And, like I said, and you could say, it's super over the top and kind of cartoonish, but like we're saying, we're way on the myth side at this point of that, scale that we've been on. And so, like I said, basically being the personification, like almost like a metaphor for how deep and dark this place goes. It makes sense he'd be super over the top and like he's straight out of a Lynch movie. So yeah, that whole sequence I'm actually totally for. So that's great. And then the movie continues. And here's something I should bring up. Notice that I haven't really mentioned Manny much, despite the fact that seems to be supposed to be our lead character. I think Diego Calva gives a very good performance, but it's kind of hard to see Manny as a lead because I really didn't give much of a shit about what was going on with him. Like, it's clear we're supposed to be seeing him throughout the movie climbing this ladder and getting more and more into the business itself. But it's like every time we saw him in a new position of power, I just really never felt like there was a journey there. Like there was, like it didn't really feel like there was that much focus on him, and that comes to a head also when he and Nellie are like this romance is kind of coming together, which kind of feels like it's out of nowhere. And it's like at the beginning he says, he talks about love at first sight, but it just doesn't really feel like it's there. And her connection to him doesn't really feel like it's there as much as it's clearly supposed to be when we see how they act towards each other towards the end. So yeah, it didn't really feel like the movie had much of a lead character, and the closest thing would be Nellie, probably. Because even Jack seems like he comes and goes throughout, even though he's the focus of his own story. It's Yeah, it felt like the characters that were supposed to be like way in the spotlight just kind of feel like they're almost in the background. And it's like Manny doesn't even really feel like an audience surrogate either. It's just kind of like he's having his own journey, but it feels like we're only getting tastes of it, and it doesn't really matter that much. Then there's Jovan Adepo, who is the trumpet player, and he's another person where I he's supposed to be crucial, I think, but I kind of kept forgetting he was in the movie. And it's like every time he would pop back up, it'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot this story's happening also. But it's like it didn't really feel connected to anything. Like it does show the darkness of what's going on, and he has interactions with Manny and stuff like that. But it's like when he gets to the moment where he like basically has to blackface himself, and it's like you really see like the horrible nature of the imagery and how just, like I said, completely soul-sucking it can be. It's there, but like I said, it really doesn't feel connected to anything. And that's... Yeah, I don't... A thought crossed my mind where it was like... I remember when La La Land came out and everybody was pissed that this movie about jazz had no black people in it. So it was like... That's the only thing I can think of for why this character is even in this movie. It's like, okay, here, we'll put jazz in... I've got to put jazz in the movie, so we'll go ahead and do this storyline that shows, the racism and what they were made to do and stuff like that. That's... I don't know. But it's a lot of it's very disjointed when you look at some of the side characters that didn't leave as much of an impression as, like, an Eric Roberts or a Lucas Oz or whatever. So, yeah, or Tobey Maguire especially. Yeah, so eventually, what's interesting about this, though, is that the fact that it's like 3 hours and 10 minutes was something that was scary going in. But it doesn't feel its length. And it's one of those cases where I didn't feel like, oh my god, I've been sitting here for so long. But there were cases where it was like, when I would remember a previous scene, it'd be like, oh yeah, it does feel like that scene happened a very long time ago. But I never felt like I was like, okay, please end, get me out of here, this is too long. The only time I felt that was pretty much at the very end, where we do get our epilogue. And we do have a nice thing where it transitions and we get, this montage of movies through the years, through the decades. And it shows us, like, the history lesson we got in Nope about the first thing on camera, and then forward to stuff like, the movies of today. That's something that I appreciate, and it's like, oh, that's cool. I can see what you're doing, Chazelle. That's great. When we got to the bleeding colors and the flashing, colored screens, that's when it was like, okay, dude, wrap this up. So yeah, like at the very end, I was like, okay, I gotta go now. So, and that's, for me, it's 3 hours and 10 minutes. That's pretty good time wise. So, yeah. So a lot of mixed feelings here, obviously. Overall, I would say that I think it's good. It's got a lot of things I find annoying. It's got a lot of things I could have definitely done without. But there's a lot of great stuff in there, too, that finds itself at just enough of a balance to kind of almost cancel out the stuff that doesn't really need to be here. So, and the stuff that should have been more expanded on, like, Adepa playing the trumpet player and stuff like that. Lee Jung Lee is also somebody I didn't even mention. who could have used more screen time also. So that's pretty much how I feel about that. I don't know what else I can say. I don't even know how long this has gone on just talking about Babylon. So let's go on to Glass Onion. I'm just going to say right up front that I love this movie. I just want I just want to put that out there in case I have to do a speed round now that since Babylon took so long. But yeah, so I really liked Knives Out, and I do think he probably made something even better with this. Like I feel like I'd probably be more prone to rewatch this before Knives Out, even though Knives Out is very rewatchable in its own right. Um, I just really love what's going on here. I love the new cast. I love Daniel Craig playing this part so much. I cannot get enough of Daniel Craig playing this part. I've talked before how I'm not the biggest Daniel Craig fan, but when he does comedy, I'm like front row seat when Daniel Craig does comedy. He's perfect for it. That comedy is his real calling. Forget Bond and action movies and gangster movies and all that stuff. Comedy is Daniel Craig's calling, and I will stand by that forever. And when I was going into this, it's like, think about it. This movie has Edward Norton and Leslie Odom Jr., Catherine Hahn, just Jessica Henwick, who's really starting to break out. Batista, a lot of great people are in this movie. And when I was going into Glass Onion, all I could think was, I can't wait to see Benoit Blanc again. Like, that's it. And I love that. I love when you can make a franchise, because that's the thing is, when you do things and you expand things and do franchises, it's all about, what are you going to do next? What's the different thing you're going to do? And it's like, it doesn't feel like it happens enough where you come to a franchise movie for the center character, like the main character. You always want to see, like, oh, what else is this going to bring, or what other character is going to come into this, what other plot points or whatever. And it's like, just to be able to say, I just want to see the lead character again, that is an accomplishment all in itself. And I am so glad that we have this. And I hope there's a ton more of these, to be honest with you. I've been saying before how, like, I'm just really franchised out at this point. Give me a whole bunch of Knives Out movies. I'm here for it. And I trust Rian Johnson to be able to continue on. I imagine he's smart enough to where he will continue on until he really is out of ideas. And if he feels like he's got an idea that's not quite good enough, he'll probably stop, and he'll know when to stop. And that and and it's like the fact that I can't even fathom where he even begins here. Like, I have so many questions going in. Like, does he know the outcome, or does he just start with the characters and go, and then eventually come up with something? And because it all feels so precise, and it's like there's got to be like a full outline of this before he even starts writing a script for it to be this well put together and this well thought out. And talking about the new characters here, because that's the thing also is, when you get, attached to the actors and the characters, because Knives Out obviously has an amazing cast within itself, and they all got something to work with. When you hear there's going to be a Knives Out sequel, but it's going to be a whole new cast, apart from Craig, you're like, oh man, but I just got attached to that cast. Oh, but then it's like Taskmaster. It's like, you feel like, oh, there's no way this cast can be topped. And then it's like, oh, okay, now this cast can't be topped. And it's like, okay, let's see how you can keep doing it. And this, and the way they introduced the characters also, the very smart way that he decided to set this movie in May of 2020. So it's like right when the pandemic was like really happening. And so the way that the first introduction to the characters are basically how they approach the pandemic. And just when you see that in itself, you feel like it says a lot about the characters already. And that's just the start. That's just the starting point before we really get into these characters and what their vices are, what bad things there are about them, what deep parts there are about them. There's a whole lot of stuff going on here with kind of all the characters, and the way we learn more and more about them, and the fact that you crave that you want to keep knowing more and more about them as it goes on, and what exactly their connections are. It's just really, really fun too. Like, it's like, you can say, for a movie to be good, it has to do this. The characters have to be this particularly fleshed out, and I can talk about how, like, the lead character needs to be as great as Benoit Blanc. But it's like, when you think about how much thought has to go into these, and complications and all that, but still come out coherent at the end, it sounds like a lot of work. So the fact that, like I said, you can put that together, but also the movie's just such a fun experience, just all around. Is yeah, these movies feel like such a breath of fresh air, and while also resurrecting a genre that felt like it had kind of had its time and gone away, and there wasn't really much else you could do with it. Bringing that back, and it's a genre that everybody loves. Everybody loves trying to figure out a mystery, and the fact that these movies do that as well as they do, while taking shots at like Clue and Among Us and stuff like that, drawing attention to those games further shows how much people love trying to solve mysteries, and the fact that Benoit Blanc hates these games and thinks they're dumb is just one of the funniest things ever. By the way, so there's that. And I also love talking about building a franchise and a character. I also love that it's not too reliant on itself, and it also sets up that there's a sort of vast thing happening here, and we have a character with a real past here, which makes Blanc even more interesting, because when Blanc first arrives on the scene, I think it might be Catherine Hahn that says, "Oh my God, you're Benoit Blanc. Didn't you do didn't you solve the mystery of the ballet dancer or whatever it was?" And it's like, I love the history that gives Blanc, because it's a mystery that we don't know about. She could have just as easily said, "Weren't you the guy that solved the mystery about the mystery writer, the Christopher Plummer character?" But no, they don't have to reference the other movie, because Blanc has done so many other things and been on so many other cases. And the way they set that up just with that I love, where it's like, you immediately say, "Well, I want to hear this ballet dancer story. I want to see that whole thing play out." And yeah, but they also do bring it in later, though not as blatantly, where it was, he's talking about an anonymous invitation, and he tells Norton that, anonymous invitations are not to be trifled with. And it's like, oh, that's a reference to the fact that he didn't know who hired him in Knives Out. So it's like, it's still in there, and it's still establishing that Knives Out is in this world, but there's also so much other stuff that's happened that we haven't seen. And I love that feeling, and giving Blanc this whole, seasoned history as a detective. As if, seeing him solve mysteries isn't going to tell us that anyway. Just getting those little bits and, like, establishing, a whole thing it's just fun. I just love it. I also love, you know what? I don't know how I can really dance around a lot of this. So there's going to be spoilery stuff in here. I'll just say that now. So I'm, like, giving you a chance now. If for some reason, I feel like watching a Glass Onion review of, like, somebody actually doing a video is a really bad idea if you haven't seen it anyway. But okay, now that you've had that chance, what I especially love here is how difficult Rian Johnson makes these mysteries, but at the same time they're always so obvious when you know everything. And it's like he's really, really conquered this whole thing of being able to put things directly in front of your face, and there's a confidence to that too, because very confidence, and also very risky, like admirably risky. One of the big spoilery things I want to talk about right now in regards to that is this whole idea of Norton handing Batista the glass that has the pineapple juice in it that ultimately kills him. And so this whole idea of literally having that happen. Like, it's not he doesn't try to trick us through the edit. He doesn't cheat. He literally shows us Norton hand him the glass. And it's up to us to catch that it happened. And then that whole thing where it goes back, and we talk about what everybody else, where he says, what I wanted you to see, and then that's when we get the edit that makes it look like we saw something else, when that's not what happened. And I think it definitely warrants, like, you could say it's cheating to give us the cut of him handing in the glass, but it's not cheating, because the first cut's already there. It's already there in plain sight to be observed if one should see it. And it's like the riskiness that takes, and the confidence that takes, that people may not catch that right away. But there's also something here that works about this and that works about Knives Out, and that's the fact that even if you catch something like that, there's still so much going on. Your brain is still frazzled trying to put all the pieces together. Because I feel like what's great about this is that these are the kind of movies where you could be worried about spoilers, and because I was talking before about how like they've been Knives Out or Glass Onion has been getting shown for like 2 months now, and it's like for a movie that's a murder mystery and based on its plot twists, how do you trust putting it out there for audiences and not having it get out? But it's like there's so many twists and turns in these movies that there's not really one sentence you can say that would completely spoil them. Like, you could say Janelle Monáe plays two different characters because they're twin sisters, but there's still so much more to it than that. You could be watching the movie and spot Norton hand him the glass, and you could say, well, Norton's definitely guilty of something, but it's like there's still so many parts of the story that have to come together. Even if you saw that and you pinpoint, like, okay, so I saw him hand him the glass, which means I know Norton is bad now, but what exactly is the plan and how is this going to play out? Like, what's the reason for all of this? That's still a mystery in itself. And so, all of that. And for the record, no, I did not notice Norton handing the glass. Completely missed it. And it's like, maybe my mind saw it and didn't really register it. And then it further solidified pushing it out of my mind when we got the second cut of him not handing it to him. That's just really good. That's just really, really good stuff. I love it. And also the way it builds suspense. There's the whole thing about, the security with the Mona Lisa. And there's that whole sequence where the glass keeps going up and down, and we keep getting like closer and closer zooms, and it's clear that some sort of tension is building. It doesn't look like there's any threat in this room whatsoever, but that scene is so anxiety-inducing as we're building up. Like, we know something is about to happen, but we don't know what. And that's... Yeah, and doing the whole thing of going back and showing us the entire first half of the movie all over again from a different perspective is very... The movie has an incredible flow. Like, you would think there'd be something almost redundant about that, but... Like I said, there's something about, trying to catch all these little tiny individual details. This movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I would have never, ever guessed that, quite honestly. Like, I know when you pull up Netflix, obviously it says 2 hours and 20 minutes. I forgot about that completely. Like, it just kind of, everything flew by. And here's the great part, is, this is the notebook where I wrote down stuff I wanted to talk about. There's not a lot of stuff on there. This is the notebook I used. All of this writing was me trying to solve the mystery, just to see if I could figure things out. And you see, I filled this page. This is very tiny handwriting. This page is full. And I was writing down everything from our Leslie Odom Jr. and Catherine Hahn conspiring. There was that moment when they were in the corner of the pool together. I was really suspicious of Jessica Henwick. I kept thinking, like, she has to play a bigger part in this. There's something about her that feels like she's just almost as out of place as Blanc is. And there was, like, who gave Blanc the box? And it's like, oh, was it Andy? But then it's like, oh, no, it can't be Andy because she smashed her box. And then you just keep doing these webs. By the way, filled up this whole page. None of this was even close to what was going on. Not even a little bit. And I love that. And I was writing down fucking everything. I love the Noah Segan cameo. Because it's an ongoing joke that Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Noah Segan are in every Rian Johnson movie somewhere. Joseph Gordon-Levitt as the Hourly Dong might be one of the best cameos ever. I don't mind being hyperbolic about this movie either. And then there was Noah Segan walking in and out and saying, hey, I'm just here, ignore me, don't mind me. And this is the thing too that Johnson does, is everything is so obvious. Like, when you watch Knives Out, it's so obvious that Chris Evans is the bad guy. When you watch this, it seems like it'd be so obvious that Norton's the bad guy. But it's like the whole web we have to go through to get to those obvious points is why we're here. And so you're constantly thinking, anytime something happens in this movie, you're like, well, that could either be one thing or the other. Like, it's either that means something or that doesn't mean something. And it's like, just everything is like that at this point. So I love the fact that when Noah Segan walks through this movie keeps saying, don't mind me, ignore me, I'm not here, you're either thinking, okay, so it's blatantly obvious, we have to pay attention to him, or what it ends up being he's literally telling us to our faces exactly what he is. He's nobody. He means nothing. He's a total red herring. And that's like I said, the fact that you're always wondering, because he knows exactly how to make things seem so obvious, you're constantly second-guessing everything you're seeing. And even then, there's still surprises in there that you wouldn't have even thought of to, first or second guess. And it's like, I love it. I really love it. I do. And I also love the fact that he's now done the same thing twice here, but in a totally different way, where it's laying everything out that would be the end of any other mystery. Where it's like the idea, you would think going into Knives Out, it would be like, the mystery is who killed Christopher Plummer. And we learn in the opening 40 minutes that he killed himself. And there's a whole other thing after that. And it's like there's a whole mystery surrounding that is solved. And we know everything. Even if other people don't, we do. That's the end of it. And now it's everything after that. And so here also, the idea you think is going to be, the idea is it's going to be a murder mystery game. But then you think, like, is Norton going to be Mr. Body? Is he going to actually get killed? And then it's going to be that. And the idea is, like, who's it going to be? And you keep, looking around and you're immediately taking things in, like, how does this person connect to Norton? Does this person have a reason to kill him? Does this person have a reason to kill him? And what is that? And how does this connect to that or whatever? And right away, just right away, we put an end to Norton's little murder mystery game because Blanc figures it out immediately. And the thing is about that, the brilliant thing about that is, of course he did. Of course he figured it out right away because he's Benoit Blanc. Of course he would. But the thing about it is, Blanc has his whole Poirot moment where he runs down everything in the first half hour of the movie and figures this whole thing out. And the brilliant thing about that also is the fact that he's using clues that we observe in the first half hour. Where there were things I was writing down in this notepad trying to figure out what the mystery would be, and they ended up being part of Norton's mystery that's completely laid out in the first half hour. And then it just goes, and it's wow. I love this movie so much, man. I really do. And yeah, Janelle Monáe obviously is getting a lot of awards buzz here, and it's great the way she plays the two totally different characters, but also brings out there's so many different layers going on here. She's got to play the sister that gets killed in flashback that kind of. We see the way they interact, and we see her get betrayed by somebody that she trusts, and she goes through that whole thing. Then we've got to see her play the twin sister, who is completely different, has a completely different personality, and then has to pretend to be this person, and then has to be this person pretending to be this person while drunk, and it's this whole ongoing thing. There's so many layers to it, but honestly, a performance that really stuck out to me, maybe one of the most besides Craig, and Norton's fantastic also, especially in the ending bits. Kate Hudson really stood out to me, and I'm so glad, because she's been in so much shit. I think people tend to forget that she's an Oscar-nominated actress. And she's Oscar-nominated for a reason, because when she has a part that she can really do and really play well, that has layers to it, she can do that. Let's not forget this is in her blood. Oscar winning is in her blood. So being able to play this kind of character that feels very... Not only is she a great satire on so many personalities that we see in the idiocy of a certain portion of celebrity culture, but like how this plays in also, and how she's so certain of herself while saying these really stupid things and believing these stupid things. And how she takes what could have just been a caricature of a certain, type of celebrity and makes the character feel like really real. Like it's like you fully believe the sweatshop mishap is something that somebody like her would actually think and would actually get themselves involved in. And that's something that you see consistent with most of the characters. Playing like these sort of recognizable types. And yeah, so that's... I don't know what else I can really say without going through all the different details of why I love everything, because that would be here all day. And like I said, Babylon already took us all day to talk about. So yeah, I really, really love Glass Onion. So, and I'm very, very enthusiastic about it. So, and I can't wait to watch it again, quite honestly. So let's talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. a movie that I kept forgetting was supposed to exist. And because the first Puss in Boots movie was 11 years ago, 2011, yeah. And so it's like you think, you know, taking the character who started off in Shrek 2, and he was obviously the breakout character. I vividly remember, you know, the first time seeing Puss in Boots on screen and just, you know, immediately loving that character and the audience eating it up. And then it obviously was inevitable he would get some sort of spin off. And I remember when I saw the first Puss in Boots movie the first time it came out in 2011, I wasn't really that crazy about it. But then I saw it again, like maybe 4 or 5 years later or something, and I liked it a lot more. And I thought it was a lot more creative than I was giving it credit for. And it was funny and smart. And so it was like, okay. So going into this, I kind of thought, oh, this probably won't. I underestimated it again. I was like, oh, this probably won't be much. And it feels like it was just kind of thrown out. Because, like I said, I felt like we heard about it forever ago, and then it just kind of never came out, and then it's like, oh, here it is. And it's the subtitle, The Last Wish, and it's like, what is that even referring to? Like, how does that relate to anything? Well, we do get a prologue at the beginning that talks about this star that's going to get, that, you know, grants this wish. And we also have this side thing going on with the fact that Puss is on his last life. He's gone through 8 of his 9 lives. And we get this great, funny, creative montage about all the lives that he went through. And Antonio Banderas, obviously, is the heart of these movies and how this character has been as successful as he is. Like, he can do, you know, he has, you know, like, the hat and the boots and the appearance and all that. He's a fun character. And he's got the eyes and all that, which are funny also. But it's Banderas is what really brings the magic to it. They're like, if it wasn't him and it wasn't his charisma that he has, these movies would not be what, this character wouldn't be what he is without Antonio Banderas. And I love that dude in general so much anyway. And what I love about this especially that really stood out was the animation and how, like, with a sequel like this that sort of feels like it just kind of happened. I think one of the first things that would happen is the animation would look really lazy, but I feel like it's even more vibrant and colorful than the first movie was, and might even rival, you know, like the Shrek movies themselves, and that makes a big difference also, especially because I've talked before about my emotional distance lately with animated movies. And it's like this almost soullessness of a lot of animation is a big problem with that. But like even down to the details, like when you see like the way his whiskers are animated, and the way they come to life, that's something that those kind of details are something I can really appreciate and actually can make me feel like I'm getting emotionally invested in an animated movie. Like I said, it feels like it doesn't happen that very often anymore. But another thing this movie accomplishes really well is that there's so many aspects to it that you would think would be reasons that it would fail, but they just find ways that actually makes it stronger. Like the idea of Puss basically retiring to make sure he doesn't lose his last life. There's this whole sequence where he decides to start living like a normal cat, and it feels like it's on the verge of becoming like The Secret Life of Pets. And I was kind of really afraid that it was going to be like that was the direction we were going for a second. Because I went into this pretty much blind. I had no idea like what the plot was or anything. But yeah, and then there's even funny moments here, and he meets another side character, who's like it's like a little dog. I don't know if he's a Chihuahua or what he is, but he's a very small dog and very rambunctious and has a big personality. And this is another thing where it would be like, oh great, this is going to be the annoying side character. But no, he's very funny and very sweet, and it's to see the camaraderie between them build is actually really nice, and he becomes this great side character, and he brings a lot of emotion too. There's this really great and touching moment during one of the action scenes where Puss, because he's afraid of losing his last life, he starts having what I guess is an anxiety attack, where he's laying against a tree, and I love the fact that this little dog basically comforts him in the way that a dog would, was something that was like really unexpected and actually touching between these characters. And he's not just the annoying side character that he could have been. But another way that this could have really failed and it could have really been off more than it can chew is the fact that it has so many villains in it. We have the first one we meet is the big bad wolf, who is like genuinely that was really surprising how genuinely terrifying he is, and I love the fact that that's another thing I feel like we haven't seen for a while, because I remember growing up with the animated movies that I grew up with, and there were like terrifying villains in there, like Scar and like Gaston when he started to go crazy. These villains that felt deadly. Ursula, I guess you could say. Even though I didn't really grow up with her, but Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective when they're on Big Ben, stuff like that is the kind of scary that I feel like the Big Bad Wolf finds here. And I like the fact that we're sort of like traumatizing children again. Like they kind of like to be traumatized by movie villains. They kind of need it, and it's and this movie is willing to go all in on that. Um, but on top of him, we also have Goldilocks and the Three Bears, who are like part of like this whole thing now. Where they're working together, and I believe Goldilocks is Florence Pugh, and the mother and father bear are Ray Winstone and Olivia Colman, and that in general is just amazing. I'm not sure who the baby bear was, but his voice sounded familiar. But then we also have John Mulaney, who is big Jack Horner, who's tired of being little Jack Horner, and so he's like this crime boss type. He kind of reminds me of the Into the Spider-Verse version of Kingpin, and it's but he's little Jack Horner, who is now big Jack Horner, and he has John Mulaney's voice. And everybody is after this star that's going to grant this wish, and there's something surprisingly clever about everything here, like the way they're incorporating the fairy tale creatures, and the fact that Jack Horner is actually very bitter about the fact that he's technically not a fairy tale, he's just a nursery rhyme. That even comes up. And they said the jokes here, and the fact that Jack Horner has Excalibur, but it still has the rock attached to it. Stuff like that, like it's all these details that I feel like most movies just focus on, the slapstick and being as frantic as possible and just accepting themselves as nothing but kids' movies and just wanting to be this, oh, look at all this stuff. And it's like when you actually see the sort of detail that goes into the jokes and stuff like that, and the animation itself, you can really finally start to appreciate it. I know there's a lot of acclaimed movies that do this also that I still didn't take to. But I don't know, this one was just really working for me, I think. And I guess just going in with no expectations helped a lot too. So, yeah, like I said, the creativity and the way they incorporate the characters, and the fact that these characters aren't always what they seem, is also something that feels like it could be played out, but they actually handle it really well and do some pretty surprising things with it. And the way, the climax plays out, it does get to that point where it does have that extra climax where the villain, grows really big, which is, a crime that so many animated movies commit, and usually the lower tier ones. So I'm surprised a movie this good and this smart fell into that trap. But up until then, everything was pretty much working for me. And also bringing in Kitty Softballs again, the Salma Hayek cat, where we get the story of why they weren't together at the start of this. As like I said, the stuff they're doing with the characters is so surprising to me, and it's like they're not necessarily just writing everything off. It's like how everything sort of has a purpose here, and yeah, and there's things in here that are actually genuinely touching and almost deep, I guess you could say, in a way. Like when we're looking at where the bar is for a Puss in Boots movie, it's it actually has a surprising amount to say that's positive and not just sort of throwaway. Lessons or whatever. Like there's actually, like I said, the way the characters interact and the sacrifices they're willing to make feel like more than you would see in a typical movie like this. So yeah, so I wouldn't even see this as just another sort of throwaway sequel to a movie that's already a spin-off. As I continue on with this, only really taking to a handful of animated movies, I can say that I do really like this one. So, and the fact that it's also just very funny at the end of the day really goes a long way. Also, hearing Puss in Boots say, "What the hell are you talking about?" to this dog, it took me back to my childhood where it was like it was sort of jarring to hear an animated character say that in this. So I like that's something here. not saying that, like, hell is super vulgar or anything like that, but I said the fact that this movie seems to have a maturity about it that it's not sorry for. Also, I feel like takes it a long way and kind of puts it above a lot of movies that might be of this type. So, yeah. So, let's go ahead and end on Empire of Light. This depressing affair. Because we've talked about this a lot in our awards videos, but let me just run this down again because it's so insane. um, Sam Mendes made this movie. It stars Olivia Colman, and Colin Firth is in there. It is shot by Roger Deakins. It is edited by Lee Smith, who is the editor for like a lot of Peter Weir and Nolan movies. We got a Reznor and Ross score. It's set at a movie theater. It's set at Christmas. This sounds like a dream. Like, this sounds like one of the best movies of all time when you just say those things. And then something happened, and like the reviews were coming out, and they were really bad, and it's like, what the hell happened? There's no way. Like, how? Like, how does a movie that has all these credentials get like a 40-something% on Rotten Tomatoes? Like, how does that even happen? There's no way. There must be a mistake. There must be something that they're not seeing. So, and I had this little bit of optimism in me even going in, where it's like, I was just like, there's just no way. There's no way at all. And I kept hearing about, like, oh, it started to get a little more realistic when I started hearing about, like, it's very disjointed. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It's emotionally all over the place. And it's like, okay. And then it occurred to me also that, this is, I believe, Mendez's first outing as a sole writer. Because I think believe it or not, I think 1917 was his first writing credit, and he obviously had his co-writer. And those were stories that were coming from, his family in real life. This just being a script where I don't know what the foundation for this script was, if there was anything he was pulling from real life or anything like that. But he's like the sole credited writer, and just immediately I have to assume there's something there as to how this could turn out the way it was. And it's like, maybe he's much better suited as a director than like actually writing the script. Because this is just, as alluded to, all over the damn place. Like, holy shit. And it's like, when you look at it from the perspective of our characters here who work in this movie theater, this is a very nice looking movie theater. It's a very classic movie theater. And the setting, based on the movies, appears to be in like 1980 to 1981. Because both Raging Bull and Chariots of Fire are mentioned. So, and among others, and Being There is apparently somewhat new, which was 79. So we're in this area of these 3 years. And we're basically, we see this, what, would be this magical place to any, sort of customer or moviegoer, but we're kind of seeing it from the perspective of the theater employees. And it's like, when you go in and you see theater employees, you see people who are just over it. Like, people, like, where once you go here enough, this is just a movie theater's just another place. Like, it's just work. And there's nothing real magical about it or anything like that. I love those little slides that go by when a movie is starting in theaters, and they're talking about, sign an application and, come and work at the theater, and they say, get your start in the movie business. And it's like, that's... I think I've heard actual employees scoff at that when that goes by. And it kind of feels like that's the perspective we're looking at this from. And, look, I'm not saying... Like, we're going to be coming back to Babylon a bit here, obviously. Talking about the joy that movies bring and the magic that movies bring. And I also want to mention... A big problem with this movie is probably going to be it's not what people are expecting it to be. Like, if they go in looking for a movie that's about, the magic of movies and the love of movies and stuff like that, they're going to be disappointed, and that you shouldn't base a movie on what you thought it was going to be and it not being that thing. Because the movie was always the movie, regardless of what people thought it was going to be. But with that said, it does feel like... It kind of feels like when you go to a movie expecting a movie about the magic of movies and you get something else, and especially when that movie portrays it the way this movie does, it feels more like imagine going to what you think is going to be a live performance But you're told to just sort of sit in the green room and watch it on like a screen, but you can't see the live performance. That's basically what this movie's approach feels like, as far as being set amongst, a movie theater and having the magic of movies in the background. And that only comes up in like the last few moments because we're looking at the perspective of Olivia Colman's character, who is somebody that works at this movie theater but doesn't watch movies. And she says she doesn't watch the movies because it's for the customers. And so that's the perspective that we're getting this movie from. And there's a lot of stuff that happens here that I just really didn't care about. There's a somewhat love story blossoming, I guess. That's kind of mostly takes place off screen, I guess. But we have the scene. It kind of starts off with a scene where she and Michael Ward's character, Steven, I think his name was, they have a moment where they're on the roof of the theater and they share a kiss. And this kiss is followed up with Olivia Colman basically doing the "what have I done" gesture and running away. And I've honestly got to tell you, before this little love story even took off, my first thought was, if I could go the rest of my fucking life without seeing the "oh my god, what have I done" run away after the kiss thing, it would be too soon. Like, so that's if I could never see that scene again, that would be great. And that's basically how we start this. And then there's a follow up scene where she just sort of screams at him. And the thing about that is, we do learn there's a reason she screams at him, because she has a mental illness that we're kind of blurry on. Colin Firth talks about it kind of crudely, so you can't really tell exactly what it is for a while, but the weird thing about it was how these scenes play out, and then the scenes that follow them up basically act like the previous scene never happened. Like, when she kisses him and then runs away, it's like that never happened. When she screams at him, the next day she says, "Hey, sorry about that." And he's like, "Oh, that's good." And then they just... Yeah, and then eventually, apparently, a love story happened. Because now they're spending days on the beach talking about the fact that they've clearly been in bed together. The way we know they've slept together is she's apparently naked under a towel, and he's getting ready, to skinny dip in the ocean. And there's a throwaway line that says, "Oh, it's nothing I haven't seen." And it's like, oh, so that's where we are in the relationship. Okay. Didn't see the relationship, so I don't know. And so we're supposed to get really invested in this for some reason. Then, the way it handles her mental illness also is something that feels very sort of last minute. Like, in the second half of the movie, suddenly that starts to kind of overtake her character. And I feel like it's meant to be progressive as it goes on, but it's just focused on so many other things. It just doesn't even seem to care until they can give Olivia Colman her big dramatic Oscar bait scenes. And not to say that, she doesn't bring something to them, because Olivia Colman's amazing, and probably one of the best working actresses we have right now. And so she can find those moments and make them real, but I mean, still, feels like there's nothing behind them, because we don't really know enough about not just the characters, but really fuck all anything that's going on here. Because it's just bouncing around so much. And then, of course, naturally, Stephen is going to be the victim of what I can only describe as an after-school special approach to racism. Where there's nothing particularly... Like, it feels like it wants to be super deep about it, but it's all very surface level, as far as what he's experiencing and how this falls into what's going on in their environment as a whole. And it's... I don't know. There's other employees here. There's Toby Jones, that's kind of coming in and, like, showing Coleman the way, in a sense, like, towards her love of movies. Once again, he's just kind of there in the background until this eventually comes into play in the last 20 minutes or so. There's this thing going on with Colin Firth where he's the boss that's, exchanging sexual favors with her, which would... It seems like it would have to be really off-putting because he's the boss and she's mentally ill. It's like, it's a whole gross kind of thing. So, I wasn't sure what was going on when they had their first sexual encounter, and I laughed. And it's like, I genuinely didn't know. It plays like it's supposed to be comedic. But like I said, the way it continues to play out, the movie's so fucking confused. I'm starting to believe it wasn't supposed to be comedic, and that it is just a gross scenario. But I don't think the movie even knows, to be honest. So I really don't know. And like I said, Coleman's doing what she can with the material because she's amazing, but the material is just so empty. There's just nothing here for her to really. There's no depth for her, like when it comes to the scenes where she has to scream. Like it feels like it's just written so surface level that it's all meaningless. And there's nothing deeper to it, and everything about this movie is just so vacant and bland. While it feels like it's trying to be profound about so many things. Like it's one thing about, having a specific purpose that you want to reach and trying to be as profound as you can. Even if you fall flat, still you're trying to reach that point. And like I said, this movie is trying to do that with so many different things. I don't know what its real purpose even was. And it's like there's like one scene where Steven talks about like the movie going experience in general, and it's like the one moment where you can feel like real passion in this movie. And it's like, yeah, when it's not actually ignoring the movies like it wants to. I did see a headline that said, like, Sam Mendes wants you to know Empire of Light is not about a love of movies. It's not about movies in general. It's like, okay, he wants it to be a love story. He wants it to be a racism story. He wants it to be a historical piece or whatever. Why is the only ounce of passion in this movie talking about movies? If that's not what it was supposed to be about. I don't know. Something tells me it was supposed to be about movies, and it should have been about movies, because that's where the passion was. Mendes clearly has a passion for them. He's made plenty of great ones, and so what the hell is this? I don't know. There's also like an altercation with a customer that Steven has. This is another blatant example of stuff where it feels like it felt like it was supposed to be a lot more intense than it actually felt. Where it's like you can see everything it's trying to do, but it's never reaching those points. And like I said, on top of trying to do so many other things at once, it just never hits a mark. Except for like the one moment where Steven's talking about the movie going experience, and the scene where Toby Jones shows Coleman being there, and she gets to experience the magic of movies herself. These scenes are literally the very end. The very fucking end of this movie that's almost 2 hours. It's like, good lord. Oh my god. So, on that amount of confusion, I think that's it. That's all I want to talk about now. So, we've got more stuff coming, more reviews and all that shit. Until the next thing, I think that's it.